Hey guys, welcome back to Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha and I feel so blessed and truly so grateful to be a professional Vedic astrologer. And essentially what we're doing on this channel is bringing the ancient, accurate, predictive system of Vedic astrology into the modern world, which is the whole point of the work that I do. Because when we really get into a Vedic chart analysis, it is so detailed, so pinpointed, so accurate, and I love to do these really in-depth chart analysis videos to show you guys the depth and the beauty of Vedic astrology and how different it is from Western astrology. So I thought this was going to be such a fascinating chart to analyze today because Matt Rife has been going through a lot of controversy for the past couple years, right? And interestingly enough, he has this whole experience unraveling right now where he has acquired this cursed doll. And, oh my goodness. Okay, so we're going to go into all this, right? I want to analyze some important aspects of Matt Rife's Vedic astrological chart just to do analysis, to teach you a little bit about his chart itself. And then I want to go into the fact that he's in Sade Sati, like Saturn is transiting his natal moon right now in the 12th house of all things moksha and spiritual and anything beyond this realm. So isn't it interesting that he's having this huge karmic lesson that's about to unfold around this acquired mystical doll while Sade Sati is happening in his 12th house? And also he was going through his Saturn return over the past couple years, which is when he had some conflict and controversy in his career because he made some jokes that were not so well received about women and things of that nature as well too. So he was in his Saturn return, which Saturn is actually the ruler of his 10th house, right? So he has some career controversy when he's in the Saturn return. Saturn rules the 10th, sits in the 11th, and now he's going through Sade Sati. 7.5 years of bad luck, which it really is not 7.5 years of bad luck, but it is a time where someone attracts a lot of karmic, intense experiences. So we're going to go into some important parts of his Vedic astrological chart, doing some analysis, and then we're going to go into some transit stuff as well too. What is going on with Sade Sati? What is all this energy of Saturn? You know, when Saturn is on someone, that's when they learn a lot of these intense, sort of harsh life lessons, and they attract these karmic, intense experiences. So Saturn has really been on Matt Rife for a couple years now as well too, so we'll get into all of that. Okay, so let us start with Matt's ascendant. So Matt is an Aries Lagna or ascendant, and he has Ketu in the first house. Now, what's very interesting about Ketu in the first is Ketu is metaphysical, it's spiritual, it's strange, it's detached, it's more introverted. So interestingly enough, with Ketu right there in the first house, he was very shy growing up, right? Ketu is this shyness in the first house. It's pretty rare to meet someone who has Ketu right there on the ascendant and they're not pretty shy or introspective in their youth. So it said that he was so shy growing up that he didn't really make a lot of friends, right? So that Ketu in the first house means there's a shyness, there's an introspective quality, there's even a little bit of like a spiritual element about it as well too. Okay, so first house is Aries, and actually Mars aspects his first, aspecting its own sign. So Mars is in Libra, which is opposite of where Mars wants to be. So it's going to cause this like Kushadosha for his 7th house, giving some relationship, marriage issues. But Mars being out of its sign in the 7th is actually good for the first, right? Because it creates Mars aspecting its own sign of Aries in the first house. So it gives some strength to the ascendant. It gives some drive. It gives some ambition, right? This isn't just Ketu in the first and he's just like spiritual and metaphysical and, you know, out there and shy and introspective. Now we get Mars aspecting its own sign, right? So Mars is on to Aries. It's aspecting the ascendant, the Lagna. So now he gets a strong energy of Mars. He's driven. He's motivated. He's going to kind of offend people. He's going to step on toes every once in a while. Right, so it's not one or the other, it's both. Ketu's there, he's shy, introspective, more internal, introverted. Those things are all true. He was very, very shy growing up. Now Mars is aspecting, so he's also aggressive, he's intense, he's motivated, he's driven, right? he's a very successful comedian, right? Despite what we think about him, he is rolling around in money. So that's Mars aspecting its own sign of Aries, right? On the ascendant. Gives some drive, gives ambition for someone to achieve their goals, but also someone's going to offend people if Mars is aspecting Aries in the first house. Okay, so first house ruler is Mars, and it's in the 7th house, right? So first ruler in the 7th shows that there's an importance for him in this lifetime of business, connections, partnership, relationships, etc., right? He is in business, he works for himself as a comedian, of course. So there's an importance of business there. Also, first ruler in the 7th, there's going to be an importance of relationships, but Mars is weakened in Libra. It's next to Rahu. This is a strong Kujadosha, so he's going to have some relationship issues, some fighting, some friction, right? Also, Mars conjunct Rahu. He has a lot of energy, right? Rahu heightens Mars' energy. It's heightening all his energy. He's going to be so into physical fitness. He's going to be into movement and working out. It's also going to give someone a lot of sexual energy and sexual drive as well, too, with Rahu Mars, because Mars is that energy of like passion, sexuality, working out, moving, physical fitness. So Rahu is there heightening all of that, right? But it is that Kujadosha. So he's also going to have some troubles in married life and relationships as well, too. Okay. So let us move on to his moon. So his moon is in Pisces in the 12th house. So he has a moon-Mercury opposition, which is really interesting because Mercury is a mental planet. Moon is the mind, manas. So whenever Mercury aspects the moon, someone has a very activated mind. The mind is always going, they're always thinking, they're constantly thinking of ideas, and the mind is extremely, extremely active with the moon and Mercury in aspect. And the moon is 18 degrees, Mercury is in its own sign of Virgo at 20 degrees. So there's a lot of energy on the mental, right? And Matt Rife has said he struggles with anxiety, overthinking, and depression, and he can't sleep at night, right? So Mercury is aspect to the moon. He's thinking too much. He's always thinking. He's up late. 12th house is also the house of sleep as well, too. And so a big issue for him is the constant mental energy, right? He went on a podcast where he was talking about the fact that he hasn't slept. He said something like he hadn't slept in like 5 days in the podcast, and that's absolutely insane. But Mercury on the moon is like so much mental energy that someone is always thinking, okay? And these are two karakas for, intellect, communication. So he's always going to be communicating, expressing, right? To be a stand-up comedian, you're writing material, you're speaking in front of an audience. It's a lot of mental energy. Mercury on the moon, right? And as Mercury is also strong in its own sign of Virgo, so he's going to have some perfectionistic tendencies, perfectionistic qualities, and 6th house is also health and healing. So he's going to have a big interest in this chart in his physical fitness and health, and he works out like all the time. He's in great shape, right? Strong Mercury in the 6th, moon aspecting Rahu Mars. Rahu Mars is a classic conjunction where someone can be really gifted with like sports, physical fitness. They might even be at some point thinking about like a career in sports as well too. Like that. Okay. So let us go to his Venus Sun conjunction in the 5th house of Leo. So Sun is in its own sign, right? It's conjunct Venus, but Venus is 29 degrees. So in the Bhava chart, it's as if Venus is with Mercury in the 6th house of Virgo. So keep that in mind because basically the Bhava chart is going to give us like both things are happening, right? So yes, he has a strong Sun-Venus conjunction in the 5th house, which is great for the 5th house, but it's also like he has Venus debilitated in Virgo with Mercury in the 6th house as well too. So keep that in mind as we go through chart analysis. So Sun is in its own sign. Sun is the ability for someone to be seen. It's the ego. It's, confidence, themes of that nature. So the Sun becomes strong in the house of performing, writing, and the arts, okay? So his whole career is based around writing, performing, artistic endeavors, right? That's because a strong Sun is there and it's conjunct Venus, a benefic, right? So In the Bhava chart, Venus is debilitated next to Mercury, but Mercury is in its own sign and they're conjunct in the 6th house. So in the Bhava chart, a Venus-Mercury conjunction in the 6th would be artistic endeavors as well too, because Venus is a karaka for the arts, Mercury is writing, the mind, so someone's always going to be thinking about artistic ideas, artistic endeavors like that. So we see the creativity and the artistic talent from both ways, right? And when I say artistic, I mean to be a performer, you have to have creativity. He has to come up with material. He has to be in front of an audience. He has to be performing, etc. Right? Doesn't mean that he's a painter, but there's a creative aspect and a performative aspect to his work, right? Also, Venus is beauty. So if we take it from the natal chart as opposed to the Bhava chart, Sun with Venus is going to give someone a love for beauty. They're going to have, a lot of that Venusian energy because it's with their sun. Sun is Atma, it's the soul. So his soul is trying to go towards Venus. He's going to love beautiful women. He's always dating these models and these actress types, right? That's Sun with Venus in the 5th house of Leo, best believe it. Okay, so Sun is 24, Venus is 29 degrees. We can take this as Venus combust Sun as well too, right? It's not the tightest, but it's within about 5 degrees. So Venus combust Sun is when Venus gets too close to the Sun in degree orb, right? And what happens with that is someone is so interested in Venus that sometimes it's too much energy, right? Because if we think about the sun burns things out, right? So he's going to be so into beauty, so into women, so into the pleasures, that sometimes it's going to cause relationship issues. So, he dates these really beautiful women. There's been a lot of drama about a lot of different women have called him out, or there was one that really called him out. I think her name was Brooke Schofield or whatever. And she made a whole podcast being Matt's, this, and he's kind of playing me and all this sort of stuff. So Sun with Venus is going to give some relationship issues and issues with women because Sun is so much energy that someone wants a lot of different women. They want someone who's attractive. They want someone who's beautiful. They care a lot about looks and themes of Venus, but also it's going to be good for creativity because his soul is trying to go towards Venus, which is the arts, which is beauty, right? And despite what we might think about Matt, he is a very attractive person, right? That's going to be Venus with Sun. Sun is strong, right? So there's going to be a love for beauty and looking good as well too. It's also in Leo, right? Leo is the performer. Leo is the creative. Leo is also a lot of ego, and the Sun is strong, so he can also have a lot of ego issues as well too. Okay. So that is that, right? It's going to be really good for the 5th house of, the arts, creativity. His soul is trying to go towards Venus, women, beauty, etc. Okay. So also his second ruler of Taurus is Venus, and it's next to the Sun in its own sign. It's in the 5th house, Purva Punya. So that's a really good energy when the second ruler is in the 5th house and also aspected or sitting near a strong Sun in its own sign. So he's going to do well with money and finances because the second ruler is in the house of good past life credit. He did something good in a past life to achieve material or financial success in this one. Okay. Now, this is really, really fascinating. So for Matt Rife, his 10th house is Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. It's in the 11th. Now, usually when you see the 10th ruler in the 11th house of groups, large groups of people, friendships, organizations, it's a little bit confusing because it's what is someone's career in connection to groups of people, right? But for Matt Rife, his whole career is stand-up comedy in front of huge groups of people. So it's very specific. It's very spot on. But usually when I see the 10th ruler in the 11th house, I'm it doesn't give me that much information because what is someone doing in these large groups connected to their work? But for him, it's so literal, right? His whole career is based upon him standing up in front of these large groups of people. Okay. 10th ruler in the 11th, and Saturn is actually in its own sign in the 11th. So the 10th ruler is retrograde, but it's strong because his 10th ruler is in its own sign. Okay. So that's really, really powerful. All right, and because Saturn rules the 10th, there is going to also be, some sense that he feels like there's some delays or restrictions early on in the career, and it took him a while to get successful. He worked really, really hard. Also, the 10th ruler being retrograde will show that, like, when he was younger, there could have been some confusion around the career. He would come more into the career in his late 20s, going into his early 30s, because that's the nature of a retrograde ruling planet. Okay. Now, the moon in the 12th is very, very interesting because moon is always going to be a point of interest. It's in the 12th house of all things spiritual, metaphysical, but also film, photography, television, right? And moon in Pisces in the 12th house, I'm not sure if he ever speaks about this, but he's very sensitive. There's going to be like a deep, introspective, sensitive quality about him. He's going to feel things very deeply. He's going to be sensitive, introspective, like that. And his moon is also aspected by a strong Mercury, Virgo. Mercury is now on the moon. It's within a 2-degree orb, so his mind is going to be so active. He has to be careful of burning himself out because the two mental planets aspecting each other will give someone so much energy where they keep going and they're doing things and they're thinking and they're always going, they're always on. And it can be very detrimental to someone's health or their nervous system as they get older. So Matt does have to be careful of like burning himself out. Okay. So moon in the 12th house of Pisces. Weirdly enough, we might never think this about Matt, but Jupiter in the 8th, the moon in the 12th, Gate through on the ascendant. He is weirdly kind of like somewhat in touch with the spiritual in this lifetime. And I was actually watching one podcast of him where he talks about this time he like saw some sort of like ghost-like figure. And now he's getting involved in this doll. It's very interesting because even though he seems to be very skeptical, he's also drawn into the spiritual, drawn into the metaphysical for whatever reason. Moon in the 12th, Gate through in the first house. It's really interesting in that way. Jupiter in the 8th, he's apparently drawn to these like occult sort of spiritual spaces, even though he's not technically much of a believer, even though he's had these like ghost-like experiences. Really interesting because moon is always going to be a point of interest. It's in that 12th house, right? So very, very fascinating. Also, moon is a benefic. Mercury's aspecting. And then Jupiter also aspects, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's a lot of benefic, positive influence onto his 12th house of film, photography, television, foreign lands, and moksha, spirituality, like that, right? And he's always on film, on, podcasts being recorded, stand-up comedy, it's being recorded. He has a TV special, etc., etc. Okay? All right. So that's all very fascinating. Really, really strong 12th house, which you can see through the aspects. Okay, now another really eerily accurate part of Matt's chart is his father did die when he was very young, and his 9th house is Sagittarius, right? So 9th ruler is Jupiter. It's in the 8th house of death and loss, right? It's also in Scorpio. Scorpio is a very sort of dark, deep, taboo house in itself. So what you'll find is planets don't necessarily do well in Scorpio unless it's like Mars, but for the most part, planets don't thrive in Scorpio because it's this more difficult sort of sign, right? So the 9th ruler of the father is in the 8th house of death and loss. His father died when he was young. Also, Pluto is conjunct, right? So Pluto is in the 8th house. 9th ruler is also near Pluto, which is about death and loss as well, too. So in Sylvia Plath's chart, her 9th ruler was in the 8th as well, and her father did also die when she was young. So it's not like every chart you see, the 9th ruler's in the 8th house, someone's going to die. It's not like that. But what you'll find is that when that does happen, there's usually some connection between the 9th house and either malefics or it's connected to the 8th house of loss and death. Okay? Okay. So I also just realized Mars is aspecting its own sign of Capricorn in the 10th, so that's going to bring some strength to the 10th house. Going to energize him in the career. Going to bring this energy of like ambition, drive, etc. Okay, so also his 7th ruler is in the 5th house. This is interesting because he's going to attract a lot of past life karmic experiences in his relationships as well too. Mars with Rahu in the 7th. It's one of those charts where relationships are not going to be so synergetic for him. There's going to be a lot of like conflict. There's going to be a lot of learning. Rahu in the 7th, someone's learning a lot about themselves through the relationships. And again, he had this whole scandal with that girl that was talking about all the ways that he was not acting so great in the connection. So he's definitely learning a lot through his relationships. Ketu's in the 1st. His natural place to be with Ketu in the 1st is solitude. So when Ketu's in the 1st house, what someone is most comfortable with is 1st house, right? Self. So when they feel like overwhelmed in relationships or connections, they kind of go back to being on their own, and then the opposite, and then they go so into a relationship, and then they go back and forth, right? The nodal axis being in the 1st, 7th axis means someone is learning so much through relationships how to balance themselves between the two extremes. So it's not about being too far either way. So Matt has a lot of karma between the public 1st house and the 7th house of relationships as well too. Okay, and Matt's Atmakarka is Venus in the 5th house. Venus is arts, beauty, women in the 5th house of creativity, children. He also has a chart where I would say he would do well with investments, right? The 5th house is also investments and children. So he's also going to want children at some point in life, but Saturn also aspects the 5th. So for him, I would say children would come a little bit later on in life, perhaps like, who knows exactly when, but definitely after the Saturn return is when he would feel more called to that. Okay. So let's see. I want to see if Matt Rife does anything with investing because he has a chart that is great for investments. Also, guys, I just realized, you guys might have realized this before I did, but I realized that his acquiring of the estate is an investment. I just realized that. Okay, anyways. So real estate, he owns a $5 million home in Los Angeles, a $3 million apartment in Miami. He purchased 80 acres in Rhode Island. He also acquired the Warren Occult Museum. So that was an investment combining passion and business. Okay, I can't believe I didn't even make that connection, but he literally just invested in something. So investments are going to be important because he has a strong sun in the 5th, aspected by Venus. Saturn does aspect as well too, though. So with Saturn on the 5th, he does have to be a little bit cautious with investments as well too. But for the most part, they're going to go well, right? Because we have such a strong sun and Venus, a great benefic. Okay. Also, this is funny, Saturn in the 11th house, he said growing up he had a lot of issues with friends, groups, etc. And Saturn is that malefic influence on the 11th. But then we also get Sun, Venus aspecting, so it's like both things, right? Where it's like Saturn is there, so he feels restricted, he feels fearful. It was hard for him at first to be in front of the audience, and it was hard for him to feel comfortable, etc. But then also Venus and Sun are there, so it's also giving that creative influence to go towards the 11th house of groups, right? Like that. Okay, so that was a little bit into his chart. I didn't want to go too in depth, but I just thought those were some fascinating points, right? Venus, Sun, that strong 5th house. What you're going to find is a lot of people that get really rich, really successful, really famous. I'm not sure if you guys see a theme unraveling, but they're going to have planets either in their own sign or exalted, right? Sun in Leo, Sun likes to be in Leo. Mercury in Virgo, Mercury likes to be in Virgo. Saturn in Aquarius, Saturn likes to be in Aquarius, right? So it's these charts that produce a lot of wealth and success, it's because they have planets that sit in their own sign or their exalted sign or their Mula Tricona sign, right? It's not just coincidence that people that get really successful and rich, etc., have that life. It's because they have all these really powerful planets that are working well with them, right? His Mars is weak in Libra, right? But it's also next to Rahu, and Rahu Mars conjunct gives a lot of power there, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's definitely going to cause issues in marriage and relationships, but I wouldn't worry too much about it for the drive and the energy, because Rahu's heightening Mars, so it's going to bring this like heightened energy of Mars, even though Mars is a little bit weakened, right? It's one of those things where you have to analyze from different perspectives and kind of come to an overall conclusion. Okay. So let's see, Mercury is strong in Virgo, 6th house. Seeing if there's anything important to bring up. Jupiter in the 8th house. He would do well as well with like other people's money. He might, get some investors, get people that put a lot of money into him in this lifetime as well too, because his 5th house is strong and his 8th house is Jupiter there as well too. All right, I think his chart is so interesting because the K2 in the 1st, Saturn in the 11th, again, there's a lot of shyness in him. And when he was growing up, he was very shy. He was very uncomfortable in front of people. But then he had to push himself outside of that and get successful and get comfortable in front of groups. And I just think it's so funny because his whole 10th ruler is about groups, large groups of people. But Saturn's also there, so he's also going to have some issues there. So it's just showing you how Vedic astrology is not one or the other. It's not this grandiose, sweeping statement. It's actually these really minute aspects of chart analysis. And if you get them right, you're going to be spot on, right? Like if I told Matt Rife, hey, you're going to be really nervous in groups and you're going to, have issues with friends growing up and you're going to be shy, but you're also going to do well with performing and you're going to do well with creativity and your mind is going to be active and you're going to write, different material. He would be like, oh, that's my whole life story. Right? Like that. And then I'd bring up the investments and he would be like, oh, I just invested in something. So it's like that. Okay, so let us go into a little bit of Sade Sati because I think this is so fascinating. So Matt is currently in the height of Sade Sati because Saturn is right on his moon in the 12th house, right? So Sade Sati is a time of maturation, learning karmic lessons, learning to mature oneself around the energy of the moon. So the moon is the mind, it's the public, it's women, it's intuition. And interestingly enough, when he started his Saturn return and started the pre-phase of Sade Sati, which is like when Saturn goes the sign before the moon, he had all these issues with the public, with women, and with his career because Saturn is his 10th ruler, right? So the Saturn return and the Sade Sati happening at the same time means Matt's in a time period where he's basically learning so many karmic lessons and Saturn is trying to mature him, essentially. So when Saturn comes around energetically, Saturn is just trying to help someone grow and mature and become this more evolved version, right? So Matt learned a lot about his connection to women, his connection to the public through some controversies, some fall from grace. Brooke Schofield came out and kind of exposed him. Sade Sati, Saturn on the moon, of women and the public. He also is now having this big scandal around acquiring this doll, right? So what this time period is all about for Matt is learning these lessons so he can become a more evolved, mature, and hopefully conscious version of himself. And what's really wild is his moon is in the 12th house of film, photography, television, hidden secrets, occult, etc. And he's acquiring this whole thing that has to do with the occult, right? And I know he talks a little bit about not fully believing in all this stuff, and he says that he doesn't fully believe in astrology, etc., but I'm like, Matt, your moon is in Pisces in the 12th house, Ketu's on your ascendant, Jupiter's in your 8th house. Whether you like it or not, you're drawn to the spiritual in this lifetime. I'm like, why are you acquiring this doll, right? Like, he has some connection to the spiritual, and Sade Sati is going to teach him some lessons around it. So there's a lot of fear-mongering online. Like, this one psychic made a video where he was like, oh my god, Matt acquired the doll, like, he has to watch out for his life, blah, blah, blah. I don't see it that way, but what I will say is Sade Sati is a time period of lessons and growth and karmic experiences. So him acquiring this doll is definitely going to force him into some growth, some lessons, and some sort of experience that's not going to be easy, but it's going to push him into hopefully a more mature version of himself, right? Sade Sati is also a very spiritual time, so I do think for Matt, through this experience, he's going to grow a lot spiritually. He's probably going to actually realize, like, okay, there's something to all this, right? Like, he's going to attract a lot of these spiritual experiences. I find Sade Sati is a very spiritual time in itself because someone is in such a kind of mentally taxing time period that they need some sort of spiritual outlet. So for Matt, I do think through this experience, he's actually going to open himself up more to the spiritual. I don't think it's going to make him like not a believer. I think the opposite's going to happen, where he's going to realize like, oh, okay, there's really something to this, right? Also, he does have to watch out for his health because Saturn is in the 12th house, aspecting the 6th of health. It's also in his house of sleep, so I know he struggles a lot with sleep, and now that Saturn is on the moon in the 12th house, he has to watch out even more for his sleep during this time period and his health, right? The biggest worry I would have with Mercury in the 6th house aspecting the moon in the 12th house for him would be like his nervous system. He needs to find some ways to regulate his nervous system because he thinks too much. He's too in his mind. He doesn't sleep. His mind is overactive. He has a lot of anxiety, etc. Okay. So, yeah, Saturn is very much on Matt Rife right now. He's learning a lot of these lessons about women, the public, intuition, the psychic, Sade Sati in the 12th house. Now he's acquiring this doll where he's definitely going to learn some lessons, right? Best believe it. And I do wonder if during this, like, experience, because Saturn also, let's see, Saturn's going to aspect his 2nd house of money. You know, I'm not so sure that this is going to be the best financial decision, to be quite honest, because usually Sade Sati and then Saturn aspecting the 2nd isn't necessarily a time that I would say for someone to go invest a bunch of money into something. So I would predict this investment might not pan out the best. Like, he might either give up on it, or he might realize it's not for him, or something like that, because Saturn's now aspecting his 2nd. K2 is also over his sun and over his Venus in the 5th house. K2 is like a void, right? It's like a drain. So K2 in the 5th house of investments. It's really not a time I would have told Matt to like invest in this. Like, it's really not at all. So, you know, again, Sade Sati, we will see what happens. But more than anything, I think there might be some financial things that aren't great about this investment. Okay, also K2 over the sun can be a time period where someone feels very drained of their energy, and there might be some issues with the public as well too. Okay, Rahu is in his 11th over his Saturn, so there's going to be an importance for him this year of like groups, organizations. Maybe he's doing something with a group of people. Maybe this investment connects with other people, and you know, there's some sort of group element. We will see what happens there. Jupiter's in his 3rd house, so there's going to be some travel for him. You know, there's going to be a lot of 3rd house energy. Perhaps he's writing something. Perhaps he feels very creatively activated with Jupiter in the 3rd, aspecting the 9th of travels as well, too. He's also in a Venus Rahu Dasha, right? And Venus Rahu in itself can be a time of like ups, downs, highs, lows. He can definitely be very like creatively activated at this time, and he might, you know, be very Venus Rahu, which is like all about Venus, right? Love, beauty, all of that sort of stuff. Venus is also in his 5th, Rahu's in his 7th, so we would predict a important relationship. He might even try to go towards marriage between 2024 and 2027, because that's Venus Rahu, Venus Jupiter. Venus is in his 5th, Rahu's in his 7th. His 7th ruler is Venus, so he's in a dasha that also activates that as well too. Let's see, where's his 7th house? Jupiter, 7th ruler. Okay. Yeah, I would predict 2027 is going to be a very important time for Matt in marriage and relationships. He might, you know, get engaged or married around that time period as well too. All right, so essentially what's happening is Matt Rife is being matured by Saturn at this time, right? Saturn is trying to teach him some harsh lessons around the 12th house of all things spiritual, all things moksha, also film, photography, television. He might start some like new show or do something in connection to film, photography, television as well too. But I am telling y'all, he's about to learn some lessons for sure, right? There's going to be some karmic experiences unraveling. Again, I don't think it's going to be all doom and gloom and, oh my God, all these horrible things are about to happen. It's not like that with Sade Sati. It's more so someone really grows and learns so much about themselves through the Sade Sati experience. Where hopefully by the end of it, when he comes out of it in the next 2 years or so, he is a very different person than when he went through the Saturn return, through Sade Sati. Hopefully there will be like this big maturation by the end of it. That's like the highest form of Sade Sati. Okay? All right, so very, very interesting that all this like strange Saturn sort of stuff has been going on for Matt, right? He went from the Saturn return now to Saturn on the moon. So Saturn is very much on him right now. So there's a lot of karma, there's a lot of lessons, there's a lot of growth that wants to occur. And I would also say, again, Matt's gonna leave this time period of like Saturn on the moon in the 12th house, and you know, he has a very, interestingly enough, like kind of spiritual chart. So I don't know, my prediction is he's going to come out of this experience and be like, okay, no, there's actually really something to the whole spiritual realm. There's actually something to this, you know, whole metaphysical experience that he's putting himself in. But I don't think it's going to be the best financial decision in the long run, just because Saturn is in the 12th house of expenses, aspecting the second of money and finances. K2's over Venus, a karaka for money. K2's in the 5th house of investments. It's not a great time for him to do this big investment. All right, so I thought this was a fascinating chart to analyze, and yeah, it'll be very interesting to see the outcome of all of this, but it's really fascinating how we can really see when someone is going through a lot of Saturn transits, a lot of Saturn energy. There's usually a lot of these like difficult, harsh lessons that are forcing someone to grow and evolve and change, and there can definitely be like a fall from grace or a lot of issues in the public during a lot of Saturn time periods as well too, especially because Saturn rules his 10th house, right? So Matt is definitely in a time period of a lot of karma, a lot of lessons, a lot of experiences that are trying to get him to grow and evolve and become a better, more mature version of himself. Okay, yeah, and then K2 over his sun, there can definitely be some experience where he feels K2 spirituality, right? So K2's over his sun, so he can feel more spiritually inclined, but also he can feel kind of drained of his energy, and he can also feel like the public is going to kind of view him in some different, more negative way. That can happen a lot when K2 goes over the sun, because the sun is someone's image, their energy, the public, and so when K2 goes there, it kind of changes or takes someone away from that public image in some way as well too. All right, so let me know what you guys thought about this chart analysis. You know, I have a Gemini rising, so Lord knows I could talk forever. But I thought this was a really fascinating look at Matt Rife and what's going on astrologically. So let me know what you guys thought about this video. Comment, like, and subscribe, of course, so I can keep making content for you guys that you enjoy. And I always love to hear feedback. You guys usually leave the nicest comments. I only attract like the best people to my content, which I'm really, really grateful for as well too. All right, so we will talk soon, and comment down below what y'all thought about this video. Sending all the love. Bye, guys.